This week, the Saskatchewan government introduced the Saskatchewan First Act. That's legislation aimed at changing the province's constitution and, according to the government, protecting the province's economy from harmful federal policies. Justice Minister Bronwyn Eyre tabled the legislation, and she joins me now from Regina. First of all, Minister Eyre, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Now, the question is succinctly, because this can get quite complex, but succinctly and concretely, what would the Saskatchewan First Act do?
Well, we are unilaterally amending our provincial constitution as we are able to do under Section 45 of the Constitution Act, and thereby asserting exclusive jurisdiction under 92A of the Constitution over natural resources and that which is exclusive jurisdiction. And bear in mind, this is not an amendment to the federal Constitution. It's an amendment to the Constitution Act 1867, the provincial part of that, and our own Saskatchewan Constitution.
Okay, now since your announcement, I've been looking at some of the reaction from constitutional scholars, and they've been saying that, and you mention it, these powers, for example, over non-renewable resources, their development and exploitation, electricity generation, regulation of provincial industries, you just mentioned, they're specifically spelled out in Section 92 and 93 of the Canadian Constitution. Why do you need this act?
We need it to assert and embed within provincial constitution, the provincial constitution, the core powers, and that is a legal constitutional term, the core powers, the interjurisdictional immunity, another constitutional term, of those exclusive powers, exclusive, and that was a term that was not lightly arrived on, exclusive powers under Section 92. They exist already, but the infringements that we are seeing over and over by the federal government into exclusively provincial jurisdiction, it has increased certainly over the last number of years, and we feel that it has constitutional weight to amend the provincial constitution. That's not done lightly and is really very, very rare. And we feel that in stipulating interjurisdictional immunity, in stipulating and enumerating core powers, and really in trumpeting to the country and to the federal government and to the courts that there are exclusive federal powers and there are exclusive provincial powers is important.
To be concrete, I mean, let's look at you. I mean, you were energy minister, I believe, when your government was party to the court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and that was about the government's carbon pricing scheme. The Supreme Court made very quick work of that and said the Trudeau government had federal jurisdiction over the environment and protection of the environment. Would something like this in any way change that ruling from the Supreme Court of Canada?
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say in that case, of course, and you're right, that was dealt with, but it was dealt with through peace, order, and good government, or POG, which really was a federal trump card on provincial jurisdiction. We've also seen, however, with the Bill C-69 case in Alberta, that the wording and the holding by the Court of Appeal there was that the federal government had taken a quote-unquote wrecking ball to exclusive jurisdiction under 92A. So this is by no means resolved. POG was, as I say, a nuclear option, but the jurisdictional issue about federal and provincial jurisdiction is very much laid out in the Constitution, and we feel that it is important to formally amend and embed it in ours.
So that begs the big question then. The bottom line is, you're saying that you think that this might give you a better chance in both cases like that, like Bill 69 and the carbon pricing. Do you think then, does this lay the way for trying to re-litigate any of that legislation? Can you and would you?
Well, everything is on the table. I mean, we have a number, it's not only the carbon tax. I mean, let's keep in mind, we have a number of existentially harmful federal pieces of legislation, proposed legislation, regulation coming down the line. The clean electricity regulations, no fossil fuel generated power by 2035. That would effectively turn off the lights in Saskatchewan. SaskPower has said it is literally impossible to transition that quickly. The Queen Elizabeth Power Station just down the road here in Saskatoon powers the city with natural gas. So that is an existential problem and an economic harm. The federal fuel standard, $700 million a year for diesel consumption, gas consumption, the province of Saskatchewan, set to come into play next year. Carbon tax number 2, again, retail sector, rail, ag, naturally just fueling your car and power and gassing up your home. There are massive issues with that legislation. So we really see, you have to see this from Saskatchewan's perspective against a backdrop of cumulative economic harm and potential economic harm in the future. And that is why in the bill, we are putting in place an independent economic tribunal, which will quantify the dollars and cents of these policies. And potentially then the idea could be that we could use that evidence as admissible. Or, for example, in the case of a reference to the Court of Appeal, an interlocutory injunction, it needs, one of the tests for an interlocutory injunction is irreparable harm. And that's why we feel that it is important to quantify and define and assess the economic harm of some of these policies on Saskatchewan. And keep in mind, this is economic harm being perpetrated on just one region of the country.
All right. Well, Minister Eyre, we will watch this with great interest. I want to thank you for speaking with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.